All right, so our variance is just our way of getting to the standard deviation. And really the standard deviation is what we use when we talk about how consistent our data is, and it's what we use when we're trying to figure out if two data sets are actually overlapping pretty well. So our standard deviation is going to be the square root of that variance. So our standard deviation is going to be equal to this to the 0.5. And we're going to ignore that autofill because we don't actually need to do that. Okay, so here is our standard deviation, and that gives you an idea that you're going to find most of your data, so 68% of this is within one standard deviation of our mean. And then our 95% confidence limit is going to be about 2 standard deviations. So let's take a look at that calculation. So our 95% confidence limit, if again, looking at page 23, you can see the 95% confidence interval is 2s, which is going to be the square root of our variance, which also happens to be our standard deviation. So it's going to be 2 times that divided by the square root of how many measurements we have. So if we're looking at our interval, so our 95% range, we're going to have to figure out what the plus and minus is. So our plus and minus is going to be equal to 2 times that square root. Let's try that again. Equal to 2 times our square root divided by the square root of how many numbers we actually have. Now we have 26 samples, so it's going to be 26 to the 0.5. That's how you do a square root. Now what does that number mean? Well, it means that our mean plus or minus that is going to be where 95% of our data is if we're looking at the overall population. Now keep in mind, we're making an estimate here. We have more than 20 samples, which is why we can use the 2 here instead of having to do some sort of fancy t-test. But it's making an estimate of the overall population. If we did this test 1,000,000 times, we would expect that the 95% confidence limit would be somewhere between, say, 4.2 to about 5.6 plus or minus for things that were germinated in the cold. And you can do that same calculation here. And again, I love this copy paste. It does the math for you. So here we're looking at a range that is somewhere in the 4.9. It's actually closer to 5. So 5 to, and that's our top limit. So if we do our bottom limit, it's actually going to be about 3.725. Okay, so we're seeing different ranges, but you notice there's some overlap there. This is why we want to start looking at how much are these overlapping. So go ahead, I want you to calculate that 95% range for the yield in pounds per colony. So figure out what is the range for 2020 and 2021. That way we can see if there's an important difference or not an important difference. Go try it.